Okay, so today we're going to talk about the 3 ways we define populations, and then how we can tell whether a population is growing or shrinking, increasing or decreasing. Chase? So, y'all, geographic distribution. Do you guys know what that is? What is geography? Yeah, like a location, right? So, geographic distribution is 2 things. It's where a population is located, but also how they're dispersed in that area. Like, are they even throughout the whole area or are they clumped? So it's where they're distributed and how they're distributed. Okay, so geographic distribution, I'm going to write in a different color so you can see better, it's the where. That says where. Where population is located and how they are distributed. And I know I'm kind of using the definition, the term in the definition there, but we'll talk about that more. And again, with the how they are distributed, that's like, are they evenly spread out or are they clumped in certain areas? And a lot of things aren't evenly dispersed. They're clumped around certain resources. Can you think of a resource that organisms would kind of flock around? Yeah, like water availability can affect plant locations and animal locations, both. Yeah, like habitat such as trees can be another factor. All right, growth rate is how fast a population is increasing. Oh, I'm out of my box. That's okay. How fast a population increases. And we'll talk about the 3 factors that affect that in just a minute. And for density, I gave you a definition with the warm-up. Remember, if I was to write a formal definition, it would be the number of individuals in a defined area. But the reason that's important, instead of writing a definition, we're going to write why that's important here. The reason density is important is because as it increases, those density-dependent limiting factors have a bigger effect. So if the population is bigger, things like disease or lack of food are going to be a bigger issue. So density is really a measure of how close together the organisms are living. All right, how close together an organism lives in an area, or organisms are living in an area. That's density. And the more formal definition, how many in a defined amount of space. But we're going to use this definition. Really what it's a measure of is how close. Okay, back to population growth. There's 3 things that affect how fast population is growing. You saw one of them when we did the lily pad activity. Okay, we added lily pads every generation because they were being born. Okay, birth and death. Yes, and migration. So we're going to put birth. You're not wrong. It's immigration, but it's also emigration. So right here, we're just going to put migration. And that can be in and out, as you guys are about to see. We tend to only talk about immigration, but emigration is a thing too. Okay, so for migration, you have immigration and emigration. Immigration, think about that I as being for like in or into. These are individuals moving into a population. Okay, E is like for exit. Okay, so these are individuals that are leaving an area or a population. You can start by thinking about organisms. Why might organisms leave one population? Yeah. a better environment, right? Especially as the population grows, competition increases. And so if you're an organism living in intense competition and there's somewhere else you can go, a lot of times they'll move out to avoid competition. So this is individuals moving out of a population. What are some reasons now and in the future that human populations emigrate? Yeah, like you saw in before the flood, like climate change refugees are becoming more common. A refugee, like it has the word refuge in it, are people who are fleeing their country to find refuge in another country. And one thing that's becoming more common is climate change refugees. So drought, extreme heat waves, the little island nation that you saw before the flood, like they're going to have to emigrate because their area is going to be gone. And then, those are more topics that we talk about in biology, emigration. And we'll talk a little bit about the human population tomorrow. Okay, so y'all listen carefully so you don't get confused. I kind of skipped over the directions a little bit. I'm not going to make you calculate growth rate in here, but you need to be able to look at these factors and tell me if a population is shrinking or growing. So we've got births, deaths, emigrated, immigrated. And when I give it to you on the test, they might not be in that exact order. So you need to be able to look at it and know what's making the population get bigger and what's making the population get smaller. So which two things are going to add members to the population? Births and immigration. So I'm going to put a plus there so I know, okay, that's going to be increasing the number. Okay, and that means that deaths and immigration are decreasing the number. So if I wanted to write this as a formula, it would be this. I'm going to put it right here so you can see it while you're working. Births. Ooh, my board's offline right there. Sorry, that looks bad. Can you tell that says births? Yeah, you can just put B, births plus immigration. I'm going to add those two together because that is what's making my population bigger. And then I'm going to subtract from it the two things that are taken away from my population. And that's going to be death and immigration. So some of you are going to want to use that formula every time, and some of you are going to be able to just look at it. I encourage you to at least start out plugging in the little formula. So A is done for you. You have no immigration or immigration, which makes it a little easier. You've got 200 births and 100 deaths. So that would be like 200 minus 100. So is your population growing or shrinking? It's increasing, right? Because I'm going to have 200 added. All right, you guys are going to do most of these by yourself, but I want to skip down to D because people were getting that one wrong yesterday. So I want to skip down to a harder one as an example. It's easy to look at this and just kind of be lazy, I guess, and go, oh, that cancels out. Okay, but it doesn't because you've got to look at what two numbers have to be added. Okay, how many births do you have? We're going to start with births. 10. Okay, what do I need to add to that? The 10 for my immigration, right? So that's only 20 being added. And then how many are leaving? 200, either by death or by immigration. So my population is actually going to shrink. I'm going to lose 180. So this population is decreasing. Do we need to do another one together, or can you guys go ahead on your own? You want to do one more? Okay, let's do... Yeah, we can do G. Well, let's do F because there's no immigration on that one, so it's a little easier. Okay, what two numbers do I need to add together? On F. Let's do F. 50 and 50. So that's going to be 100 minus how many deaths and immigration? Only 2. Okay, so that's going to be a growth of 98, right? That's going to be a positive number. So this population is... Okay, see if you guys can do the rest. So what did you guys get on B? How many would enter the population? Yeah, overall, because you would have only 10 entering, and then you've got 110 exiting. So you're going to lose 100. So that population is decreasing. Okay, what about C? It's increasing. And then on E, you've got 200 deaths and 100 births. And on G, you've got increasing again. Good. Okay, look at population G. How would population change if 100 individuals emigrated? It'd be the same. It'd be no change. It would cancel out those people who are immigrating. What type of population movement is this? If a food shortage causes individuals to leave. Yeah, this is e-migration. All right. Now, this next one, again, this is kind of an older handout, but I love this to look at how populations are distributed. This is like a little ecosystem. You've got to pretend a little bit. So like maybe a forest, and it's been divided off into grids. And population ecologists actually use methods like this to take a population count and to study biodiversity. I've done this a bunch of times, like in graduate and undergraduate. You go in with like a big, like what's essentially a tape measure and measure off these different areas and collect data. Okay, but we're going to look at distribution, which is what we were talking about earlier. So you're going to do your oak trees with an X. Your owl is going to be an O, and your mice are going to be M. All right, and I'm going to use different colors so you can see it better. And you just need to follow your directions to fill in your grid, and then we'll talk about it. So 1, 2, 6, and 7 have 5. So just go in and make your 5 X's and go from there. Just follow your directions on those 4 bullets to fill in your sheet. Okay, so I'm done with that. And then 13, 15. Can you guys tell me which one has an even distribution? Owl, mice, or oak trees? The mice, because they're evenly spread throughout your whole ecosystem. So this is what I'm talking about with dispersion. These mice are evenly distributed. Which group has more of a clump? The trees, the oaks are clumped. And what probably happened there is your original oak tree probably grew in one of those first 4 grids, 1, 2, 6, or 7. Okay, the acorns were distributed, and they're going to fall most closely to the parent tree first. And then over time, they'll spread to other areas through, for example, squirrels. Squirrels like to take the acorns and hide them. Sometimes they forget about them, and a little oak tree will sprout. So maybe some squirrels have been able to carry those acorns to 13, 15, 22, and 24, but your original population of oak trees probably happened right up there in the corner, which is why they're all clumped together. Which organism has the highest population density in this ecosystem? The mice, because there's a lot of them, right? There's more in the same amount of space. But what if I wanted to zoom in and look just at my first box? Who has the higher population density in grid 1? The oak trees. Okay, so it just depends on where you're looking. You had 2 questions at the bottom. Which population has the lowest population density? The owl. And then in which boxes is the population density of oak tree the highest? That's the 1, 2, 6, and 7 up there in the corner. So this is just a visualization for you. You guys should be able to look at a picture and tell me where density is higher. Which populations have the highest density like this? Okay. And then your last one, there's a lab that goes along with this, the population sampling lab. A-Day is going to do that lab, but I thought you all would rather do the owl pellet dissection. It's definitely like the more, I guess, different lab, like more hands-on, and they've already gotten to do that. So you guys aren't going to do the population sampling lab. So this is all we're really going to talk about, population sampling. And here's the deal. Populations, a lot of times it's difficult for a scientist to go out and count the entire populations. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So for example, like if I'm studying like the number of trees in an entire forest, if I'm looking at one species, it might not be practical to try to get out and hike through that entire area. If they're evenly distributed, like the mice were in the last, I maybe can just take an estimate from that. With animals, you can't really do a grid because animals do what that plants can't do. Well, plants live and die too. It just takes a lot longer, but they move around. Okay, so like your last one, your mice were 2 in every grid, but really, if it was an area big enough for them to migrate, your mice would move around. So for animals, we do catch and release. And then if I'm sampling bacteria, they're so small and difficult to count. It'll be hard for me to count every single bacteria on the slide. So we make estimates, and this is showing you an example of that. Okay, I've already counted this first slide for you. So these are bacteria, okay, in different fields of view. In your first field of view, that's what you would see through the microscope. You have 31. Okay, so I randomly chose for you that first field of view, and I'm telling you it has 31. What would your total number of bacteria in that whole sample be? They're pretty evenly distributed. So I can take 31, or the density looks the same in all 6, close to the same. So I'm going to take 31 and I'm going to multiply it by 6. Okay, because that's going to tell me what, yeah, it's 186. Okay, and then we're going to count 2 more, and we're going to do the same thing so that you can see what happens the more samples that I take. Okay, guys, if you will complete the rest of that handout at home and then submit it on Schoology, I can check it for you and let you know if you did it correctly. I want you to complete this last page to show me your understanding. When you're done, please submit it and shoot me a message that it's done. Thanks.